The ultrasound appointment card fell out of Alicia's purse like a confession she never meant to make. I picked it up from our kitchen floor, studying the medical center's logo while my coffee grew cold in my hand. My wife of 6 months was supposed to be at yoga class, not scheduling mysterious doctor visits. If marriage is a three-legged race, I muttered to our empty house, I'm the guy who twisted his ankle before the starting pistol. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Greg Foster, and at 36, I manage 3 restaurants in our suburban Michigan town. It's honest work that pays the bills and keeps me busy enough to ignore the growing distance between Alicia and me. She's stunning in that high-maintenance way that requires constant validation and expensive salon visits. At 33, she works part-time at a boutique and spends most afternoons with her best friend Susie, planning elaborate social media posts and complaining about how boring married life has become. The appointment card was dated for last Tuesday. I remembered that day clearly because Alicia had claimed she was helping Susie with some female problems. The medical center specialized in obstetrics and gynecology. Either my wife was pregnant and hadn't told me, or she was lying about helping Susie. Neither option filled me with confidence about our relationship. I tucked the card into my wallet and headed to work, my mind churning with possibilities. The Riverside Grill was busy for a Thursday morning, and I threw myself into inventory checks and staff schedules, but the card seemed to burn through my wallet like a guilty secret. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard, my closest friend and the only person who'd warned me about marrying Alicia in the first place. Halloween party at our place Saturday night. Please tell me you and the Ice Queen are coming. Nikki's making her famous chili. Richard owned a successful accounting firm and lived in the nicest part of our neighborhood with his wife, Nikki. They'd been married 8 years and still acted like newlyweds, which made spending time with them both comforting and depressing. Their marriage was everything mine wasn't, warm, genuine, filled with inside jokes and casual affection. I texted back, "We'll be there. Fair warning, though, things are weird at home." "Weirder than usual?" came his immediate reply. "Found something that doesn't add up. We'll explain Saturday." The rest of my workday passed in a blur of supplier calls and employee reviews. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a text from Alicia, but nothing came. She'd been distant for weeks, claiming she needed space to find herself after the wedding. Apparently, finding herself involved a lot of shopping trips and secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I got home around 6 to find Alicia in the bathroom, applying makeup with the precision of a surgeon. She wore a tight black dress that I'd never seen before, and her hair was styled in elaborate curls that must have taken hours. "Going somewhere special?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She glanced at me in the mirror without turning around. "Susie's having a crisis. Girls' night at Martini's downtown. Don't wait up." "What kind of crisis?" "Marriage stuff. You wouldn't understand." The casual dismissal stung more than it should have. "Try me. I'm married too, remember?" She finally turned to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "Dominic's been working extra shifts at the factory. Susie feels neglected. She needs her friends right now." Dominic was Susie's husband, a muscular guy in his mid-30s who worked at the automotive plant outside town. He had the kind of obvious good looks that made women giggle and men instinctively dislike him. I'd met him a few times at barbecues and found him arrogant and loud, the type who dominated conversations with stories about his high school football glory days. "Since when do you go to Martini's for marriage counseling?" I asked. The place was known more for its meat market atmosphere than its therapeutic environment. Since my best friend asked for my support, Alicia's tone carried a warning edge. "Is that a problem?" I wanted to ask about the appointment card, but something held me back. Maybe it was the defensive way she was standing, or the fact that she'd put on enough perfume to choke a horse. Instead, I shrugged and said, "Have fun. I'll probably watch the game with Richard." She kissed my cheek quickly, leaving a lipstick mark I'd have to wash off later. "You're sweet. This is why I married you." After she left, I sat in our living room staring at the appointment card. The smart thing would have been to ask her directly, but our communication had become a minefield of hurt feelings and misunderstandings. Everything I said seemed to annoy her, and every conversation felt like a performance where we both knew our lines but had forgotten why we were in the play. I decided to drive to my mother's house across town. At 62, she was still sharp as a tack and had never liked Alicia. "That girl's got champagne tastes and a beer budget," she'd said after meeting her for the first time. "More importantly, she's got champagne expectations and a beer heart." Mom was in her garden when I pulled up. Wearing old jeans and a Michigan State sweatshirt, she took one look at my face and said, "You look like a pirate who lost his ship and found a hangover instead. What's she done now?" I showed her the appointment card without saying anything. She studied it for a long moment, then handed it back with a sigh. "Could be innocent," she said finally. "Could be she's pregnant and scared to tell you. Could be she's helping Susie like she said. Could be a lot of things." "But you don't think it's innocent?" "Honey, I've been married to your father for 38 years. When a woman starts keeping secrets about doctor visits, it's usually because she's either very happy or very guilty, and Alicia doesn't look happy." We sat on her porch drinking iced tea while she filled me in on neighborhood gossip. Mrs. Henderson's cat was missing again. The Johnsons were getting divorced after 25 years. The new family on Maple Street had painted their house an unfortunate shade of yellow that was causing property value concerns. "Speaking of the Johnsons," Mom said carefully, "I saw Alicia at the grocery store last week with that Susie girl and her husband. They were in the wine section, laughing about something. Alicia was standing awfully close to what's his name? Dominic. Right. Anyway, it struck me as odd. 3 people buying wine together in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, especially when you were at work and Susie should have been watching her kids." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Maybe they were planning a party. Maybe. Mom's tone suggested she thought it was about as likely as snow in July. Or maybe your wife's got herself into something she can't get out of gracefully. I drove home that night with more questions than answers. Alicia's car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't surprising since she'd said not to wait up. But when I checked my phone, there were no texts updating me on Susie's crisis or when she might be home. The silence felt deliberate. I poured myself a beer and settled in to watch television, but I couldn't concentrate. Every car that drove past made me look toward the window, hoping to see Alicia's headlights. By midnight, I was genuinely worried. By 1 a.m., I was angry. By 2 a.m., I was making plans. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in our relationship. I drove to Alicia's mother's house and left the appointment card on her front porch with a note. "Found this. Thought you should know in case Alicia needs support. Greg." It was petty and passive-aggressive, but I was tired of being the only person in our marriage who didn't know what was going on. If Alicia was pregnant, her mother would be thrilled and would immediately call to congratulate us. If she was helping Susie, her mother would know about it because Alicia told her everything. And if she was lying about both scenarios, well, her mother would definitely have questions. I went to work feeling slightly guilty but mostly relieved. At least I'd done something instead of just sitting around wondering. The morning passed quietly until my phone rang around 11. The caller ID showed Susie's name, which was odd since we rarely spoke directly. "Greg?" Her voice was high and strained. "Do you even realize the chaos you started?" "What are you talking about?" "The appointment card. Alicia's mom called her at 6 this morning, screaming about grandchildren and secret pregnancies. Then she called me asking why I was dragging her daughter to doctor appointments. Now everyone thinks someone's pregnant and no one knows who." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and dread. Maybe if people were more honest about what they were doing, there wouldn't be any confusion. "You don't understand. This is going to ruin everything. The party tomorrow night?" "What party?" There was a long pause. "Richard's Halloween party. Alicia didn't tell you we were all going together?" "She mentioned the party. She didn't mention you and Dominic were joining us." Another pause, longer this time. "Look, Greg, I think you and Alicia need to talk, like really talk, before tomorrow night. Because if you don't sort this out, Saturday's going to be a disaster for everyone." She hung up before I could ask what she meant, leaving me with even more questions and a growing certainty that my marriage was in serious trouble. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Michigan autumns famous. I spent the morning raking leaves and trying to pretend everything was normal, while Alicia fluttered around the house preparing for Richard's Halloween party like she was getting ready for the Met Gala. She'd chosen a Catwoman costume that left very little to the imagination. Skin-tight black leather that showed off every curve, complete with a mask and whip. When I suggested it might be a bit much for a neighborhood party, she gave me a look that could have frozen fire. "It's Halloween, Greg. The whole point is to dress up as someone you're not." "Right," I said. "So what are you going as? Single?" The joke fell flat, earning me an eye roll and the silent treatment for the next 2 hours. I'd settled on a simple pirate costume. White shirt, black vest, plastic sword, and a bandana that made me look more like a line cook than a seafaring adventurer. But it was comfortable and didn't require any special preparation beyond finding my old black boots. We drove to Richard's house in tense silence. Their neighborhood always went all out for Halloween, and tonight was no exception. Jack-o'-lanterns glowed on every porch, fake cobwebs draped from trees, and elaborate decorations turned the suburban street into a horror movie set. Richard answered the door dressed as a vampire. complete with dramatic cape and plastic fangs that made him lisp slightly when he talked. "Greg, Alicia, welcome to my lair of eternal damnation and really good chili." Nikki appeared beside him, wearing a witch costume that somehow managed to be both festive and elegant. She hugged us both, but I noticed she held on to Alicia a bit longer than usual, like she was trying to communicate something without words. The house was packed with neighbors, co-workers, and friends. I recognized most faces despite the costumes. There was Bob from down the street dressed as a zombie, the Hendersons as matching skeletons, and various other couples who'd clearly coordinated their outfits in advance. The living room had been transformed into a dance floor, while the kitchen served as headquarters for food and drinks. I was getting my second beer when Susie and Dominic arrived. Susie wore a fairy costume with glittery wings and a short pink dress, but she looked nervous and kept glancing around like she expected trouble. Dominic had chosen a Tarzan costume that was basically an excuse to show off his muscled chest and arms. The fake leopard print loincloth and plastic spear completed a look that screamed, "I peaked in high school but refused to admit it." "Well, well," I said to Richard, who was standing beside me watching the new arrivals. "If it isn't the king of the jungle and his worried fairy godmother." Richard followed my gaze and frowned. "Dominic looks like he's auditioning for a protein powder commercial, and Susie looks like she's about to throw up." We watched as Alicia immediately gravitated toward the new arrivals, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She hugged Susie briefly, then turned to Dominic with a smile that made my stomach clench. He said something that made her laugh, a genuine, delighted sound that echoed across the room. "When's the last time your wife laughed like that with you?" Richard asked quietly. "I honestly can't remember." For the next hour, I tried to mingle and enjoy the party, but I kept finding myself watching Alicia and Dominic. They weren't doing anything obviously inappropriate, just talking, laughing, standing a little closer than necessary. But there was an energy between them that was impossible to ignore, like they were sharing private jokes while the rest of us watched from the outside. The breaking point came during what should have been a harmless conversation about comic book movies. A group of us had gathered in Richard's den, debating whether Marvel or DC had better characters. It was the kind of nerdy discussion that usually made Alicia roll her eyes and find somewhere else to be. But tonight she was perched on the arm of Dominic's chair, occasionally running her fingers along his bare shoulder while making comments about real men and fantasy heroes. "I mean, Superman's fine," she was saying, "but he's so perfect. Where's the danger? Where's the excitement? I prefer heroes with a little more edge, a little more..." She looked directly at Dominic. "Wildness." "Like Wolverine," Dominic said, flexing his biceps. "Claws, attitude, and animal instincts." "Exactly." Alicia's voice was practically purring. Sometimes civilized is overrated. I felt something snap inside my chest. "You know what's really overrated? Men who think muscles are a substitute for personality." The room went quiet. Dominic slowly turned to look at me, his expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. "You got something to say to me, Foster?" I stood up, my plastic sword rattling against my belt. Just that some of us grew up after high school. We got jobs, responsibilities, marriages. We stopped thinking the world owed us attention just because we could bench press our body weight. "Greg," Alicia said sharply, "what's wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "My wife spends more time flirting with Tarzan here than she does talking to me. She makes doctor appointments she won't discuss, goes out for mysterious girls' nights, and acts like I'm the problem for noticing." Dominic stood up, his chest puffed out like a rooster ready for a fight. "Maybe if you paid more attention to your wife instead of your restaurants, she wouldn't need to find conversation elsewhere. And maybe if you paid more attention to your own wife, you wouldn't be sniffing around mine." The slap happened before I fully realized I was going to do it. My palm connected with Dominic's cheek with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dominic's face went red, and he lunged toward me. "You son of a..." Richard and two other guys grabbed him before he could reach me, while Nikki stepped between us with her arms spread wide. "Enough!" she shouted. "This is my house, and nobody's throwing punches in my living room." I looked around at the shocked faces surrounding us. Someone had their phone out, recording. Others were whispering to each other behind their hands. Alicia stood frozen by Dominic's chair, her face pale except for two bright spots of color on her cheeks. "If you so much as look at my wife again," I said to Dominic, who was still struggling against the hands holding him back, "I'll staple your Tarzan loincloth to your forehead." A few people gasped. Someone giggled nervously. I could hear phones buzzing as people started texting about what they'd just witnessed. "Greg, stop," Alicia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, I don't think I will stop. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine while you two play out your little jungle fantasy in front of everyone we know. I pushed through the crowd toward the front door, my face burning with embarrassment and anger. Behind me, I could hear Susie's voice rising above the murmur of shocked conversation. "You idiots! You've ruined everything!" I made it to my car before Alicia caught up with me, running awkwardly in her high-heeled boots. "Greg, wait. You can't just leave like this." I turned to face her, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine distress in her eyes. But then I noticed Dominic standing in Richard's doorway, watching us with obvious concern for her well-being. "The only thing more bruised than Dominic's ego," I said, "is my marriage license. And right now, I'm not sure which one's worth less." I got in my car and drove away, leaving my wife standing in Richard's driveway in her Catwoman costume, looking more lost than I'd ever seen her. I drove around town for 2 hours before ending up at my mother's house again. She took one look at my disheveled pirate costume and immediately put the kettle on for tea, which was her universal solution for everything from skinned knees to broken hearts. "Let me guess," she said, settling into her favorite kitchen chair. "The Halloween party didn't go as planned." I told her everything. The flirting, the confrontation, the slap that was probably being shared on social media as we spoke. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disapproval. "Well," she said when I finished, "you certainly made your point, though I'm not sure public humiliation was the best strategy." I wasn't thinking strategically. I was thinking about my wife running her fingers through another man's chest hair while talking about how exciting, dangerous men are. And now? I rubbed my face, suddenly exhausted. Now I don't know what to think. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe they really are just friends and I'm being paranoid. Mom gave me the look she used to give me when I tried to convince her I'd done my homework when I clearly hadn't. "Honey, I've seen a lot of marriages in my time, the good ones, the bad ones, and the ones that should have ended years ago. What you described tonight isn't friendship. It's two people who want each other but haven't admitted it yet. So what do? You go home and have an honest conversation with your wife. You ask her directly about the appointment card, about her feelings for Dominic, about what she wants from this marriage. And then you listen to her answers, even if you don't like them." I spent the night in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling and remembering another woman who'd made me feel like a fool. Mara had been my fiancée 3 years ago. Beautiful, ambitious, and completely unwilling to be intimate until after our wedding. She claimed it was about respect and tradition, about making our wedding night special. I'd respected her wishes, even when it meant months of frustration and rejected advances. Then she'd turned up pregnant 6 weeks before our wedding. The baby wasn't mine, couldn't have been mine, and the real father was her married boss, a man she'd been sleeping with for over a year, while telling me she needed to wait for the right moment with me. I'd called off the wedding, moved out of our shared apartment, and sworn I'd never again be the fool who believed pretty words while ignoring obvious signs. Yet here I was, 3 years later, in almost the exact same situation with a different woman. My phone had been buzzing all night with texts and missed calls, but I'd turned it face down and ignored them all. Sunday morning brought a new round of notifications, and I finally looked to see what the damage was. "Richard. Dude, call me. We need to talk. Nikki. Are you okay? Alicia left right after you did. She looked upset. My boss. Heard about last night. Take Monday off if you need it. Various coworkers and neighbors. Is everything all right? Saw the video. Call if you need anything." But nothing from Alicia. Not a single text or missed call from my own wife. I drove home around noon to find her car in the driveway and her mother's Cadillac parked behind it. Through the living room window, I could see two figures gesticulating wildly at each other. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering courage for whatever conversation was waiting inside. Alicia's mother, Patricia, was a 60-year-old version of her daughter, beautiful, dramatic, and absolutely convinced that every problem in the world was someone else's fault. She'd never liked me, considering me too ordinary for her extraordinary daughter, and had made no secret of her belief that Alicia had settled when she married me. I walked into my own house to find them both in the living room, Patricia pacing while Alicia sat curled in the corner of the couch, looking miserable. "There he is," Patricia announced, as if I were a criminal returning to the scene of the crime, the man who embarrassed my daughter in front of the entire neighborhood. "Good morning to you too, Patricia, Alicia." My wife looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. She'd changed out of the Catwoman costume into yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, and her elaborate curls had been pulled back into a messy ponytail. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Yes, we do, privately." Patricia sniffed. "I'm not going anywhere. My daughter needs support during this difficult time." The difficult time her daughter created by flirting with another man at a party? She was being friendly. There's nothing wrong with having male friends. There's also nothing wrong with being honest with your husband about mysterious doctor appointments. Both women went very still. Patricia's eyes darted to Alicia, who was staring at the floor like it held the secrets of the universe. "What doctor appointments?" Patricia asked. "The obstetrics appointment Alicia had last Tuesday, the one she claimed was for Susie." Alicia's head snapped up. "You went through my purse?" "I found the card on the kitchen floor where it fell out of your purse, and instead of asking you about it directly, I dropped it off at your mother's house to see what would happen." Patricia gasped. "That was you? You're the one who started this whole mess?" "I'm the one who found evidence that my wife is keeping secrets. Big difference." "What secrets?" Patricia demanded, turning to Alicia. "Are you pregnant? Are you sick? What's going on?" Alicia buried her face in her hands. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked. Before she could answer, my phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen, and I almost ignored it until I realized he might have information I needed. "I have to take this," I said, stepping into the kitchen. "Greg, thank God. Listen, you need to know what happened after you left last night." "I'm listening." "Alicia and Dominic had a huge fight in my driveway. She was screaming at him about ruining everything, and he was yelling back about how she'd let him on. Susie got involved, and it turned into this three-way screaming match that probably woke up half the neighborhood." "What were they fighting about specifically?" "From what I could hear, Dominic thought last night was going to be some kind of turning point, like maybe Alicia was finally going to leave you for him. But when you confronted them, she got scared and backed down. He accused her of being a tease, she accused him of being presumptuous, and Susie accused them both of being idiots." I felt something cold settle in my chest. So there is something going on between them. Was something going on. Past tense. Susie told Dominic that if he didn't stop chasing after your wife, she was going to divorce him and take the kids. Then she told Alicia that she was tired of being in the middle of their drama and that if she didn't figure out what she wanted, she was going to lose everyone. Where do things stand now? Honestly, I think you scared them. The public confrontation, the video that's making rounds on social media, the fact that everyone's talking about it. I don't think either of them realized how obvious they were being or how much attention their little flirtation was attracting. I thanked Richard and hung up, then returned to the living room where Patricia was grilling Alicia about the appointment card. "It wasn't for me," Alicia was saying. "And it wasn't for Susie, either. It's more complicated than that." "Then explain it," I said. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. "The appointment was for Dominic's ex-girlfriend. She's pregnant, and she asked me to go with her because she was scared to go alone." "Why would Dominic's ex-girlfriend ask you to go with her?" "Because—" Alicia took a shaky breath. "Because she's also Susie's cousin, and because the baby might not be Dominic's." The room went completely silent. Patricia's mouth fell open, and I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Whose baby is it?" I asked. "She doesn't know for sure. It could be Dominic's, or it could be—" Alicia's voice trailed off. "Could be whose, Alicia?" "Could be your ex-fiancé's husband's. Mara's husband, Jake. They've been having an affair for months." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Mara, the woman who cheated on me with her married boss, had married that same boss after our engagement ended, and now that boss was potentially the father of another woman's baby, a woman connected to my current wife's social circle. "This is insane," I said. "You're telling me that Dominic's ex-girlfriend is pregnant by my ex-fiancé's husband, and somehow this involves you going to doctor appointments and keeping secrets from me." "She begged me not to tell anyone. She's scared that if word gets out, it'll destroy multiple marriages and families. I was just trying to help." Patricia looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. Who is this ex-fiancé person, and why does any of this matter? I sat down heavily in my recliner, trying to process everything. It matters because it means the woman I was engaged to before Alicia has a pattern of being involved with married men, and now that pattern is affecting my current marriage through a web of connections that seems designed to drive me insane. "But what does this have to do with you and Dominic?" I asked Alicia. She was quiet for a long moment. "He knows about Jake and his ex-girlfriend. He's been upset about it, feeling betrayed and angry. I've been listening to him, supporting him through it." "Supporting him how?" Another long pause. "By being his friend, by letting him know that someone understands what it's like to feel betrayed by people you trust." The pieces were starting to come together, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. "So while I've been working and trying to keep our marriage together, you've been bonding with another man over shared feelings of betrayal and victimization. It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Alicia?" because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having an emotional affair with our friend's husband while helping his pregnant ex-girlfriend keep secrets that could destroy multiple families." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is getting too complicated for me. Alicia, you need to decide what you want and who you want to be with. Greg, you need to decide if you can forgive whatever's happened and move forward. I'm going home." She left in a whirlwind of perfume and disapproval, leaving Alicia and me alone in our living room for the first time in weeks. "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" I asked. Alicia looked at me with tears in her eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to help people, and somehow everything got twisted and complicated. "Are you in love with Dominic?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Alicia's face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, sadness, and finally something that might have been relief. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe. I'm attracted to him, and I like the way he makes me feel, but I also love you, Greg. I married you because I love you. But you're not in love with me. I don't know the difference anymore." It wasn't the answer I'd hoped for, but it was probably the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. Monday morning brought a new reality to my life. The video of me slapping Dominic had indeed made its way around social media, and my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and the neighborhood gossip group chat that someone had added me to without permission. I'd taken my boss's advice and stayed home from work, which gave me time to scroll through the comments and reactions. Most people seemed to be on my side, with responses ranging from "Good for you, Greg," to "About time someone put that guy in his place." But there were also plenty of people criticizing me for losing control and making a scene. What bothered me most was how many people seemed to have known about Alicia and Dominic's connection before I did. Comments like, "We all saw this coming," and "Finally, someone said what we were all thinking," made it clear that I'd been the last person to recognize what was happening in my own marriage. Around 10 a.m., Nikki called with an update on the neighborhood drama. "Susie's not speaking to either Alicia or Dominic," she reported. "She packed up the kids yesterday and went to stay with her sister. Word is she's talking to a divorce lawyer." "What about Dominic?" "He called in sick to work today. Richard drove by their house this morning and said his truck was still in the driveway, but all the curtains were closed." "And Alicia?" "Haven't seen her, but Mrs. Henderson said she saw her leaving your house early this morning with a suitcase." My stomach dropped. "She moved out?" "I don't know. Maybe she's just staying somewhere else for a few days while things cool down." After Nikki hung up, I walked through my house looking for signs of what Alicia had taken. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom, along with several changes of clothes, but her jewelry was still in the bedroom, and most of her belongings remained untouched. It looked more like a temporary retreat than a permanent departure. I spent the rest of the morning thinking about revenge, not the violent, destructive kind that would land me in jail, but the strategic, public kind that would make Dominic and Alicia face consequences for their actions. If they wanted drama, I'd give them drama. If they wanted to be the center of attention, I'd make sure they got more attention than they bargained for. The plan started with Dominic's truck. He was ridiculously proud of that vehicle. A lifted Ford F-150 with custom paint, oversized tires, and enough chrome accessories to blind passing aircraft. He washed it every weekend and parked it in his driveway like a trophy. I drove to the grocery store and bought 20 pounds of raw shrimp, along with several bags of used cat litter from the pet store's disposal bin. Then I waited until Tuesday night when I knew Dominic would be working his evening shift at the factory. Breaking into someone's vehicle is surprisingly easy when you know what you're doing, and I'd learned a few things during my brief rebellious phase in high school. It took me less than 5 minutes to pop the lock on Dominic's truck and distribute the shrimp and cat litter throughout the interior. Under the seats, in the air vents, in the glove compartment, and stuffed into every crevice I could find. I left a note on his windshield. "From one animal to another. Enjoy the new scent, Tarzan." The pirate. Then I drove home and waited for the fireworks to begin. I didn't have to wait long. Wednesday morning brought a string of angry text messages from Dominic's phone, filled with creative profanity and threats of retaliation. I screenshotted each one and forwarded them to Richard, along with a message. Apparently Tarzan doesn't appreciate gifts from his admirers. But the real satisfaction came Thursday afternoon, when I decided to pay a visit to Dominic's workplace. The automotive plant was a sprawling complex on the outskirts of town, employing nearly 1,000 people across 3 shifts. I'd never been inside before, but I knew from Susie's complaints that Dominic spent most of his break time in the employee cafeteria, holding court with his coworkers and anyone else willing to listen to his stories. I found him exactly where I expected, sitting at a table surrounded by guys in work uniforms, gesticulating wildly while describing his truck's mysterious odor problem. He was in the middle of explaining his theory about neighborhood kids playing pranks when he noticed me approaching. "You," he said, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward. "You bastard." "Dominic," I said pleasantly, "how's the truck running? I heard you've been having some aromatic issues." The cafeteria had gone quiet, with everyone turning to watch our confrontation. I could see people pulling out phones, preparing to record whatever happened next. "You think you're real clever, don't you?" Dominic's face was red with anger. "Sneaking around at night like a coward, messing with other people's property." "I think I'm a husband whose wife was being pursued by a married man who couldn't take a hint. But hey, if the shoe fits..." "Your wife came to me, Foster. She's the one who started this whole thing." "Really? She's the one who chose the Tarzan costume? She's the one who flexed her muscles and talked about being wild and dangerous? She's the one who made moves on a married woman at a public party?" The crowd murmured appreciatively. Dominic looked around, realizing that he was outnumbered and that most of his coworkers were enjoying the show at his expense. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "I know my wife was keeping secrets about doctor appointments because she was helping your pregnant ex-girlfriend. I know you've been using her as a shoulder to cry on while your own marriage fell apart. And I know you thought Saturday night was going to be your big moment to steal another man's wife. That's not... What's not what, Dominic? Not true? Not fair? Not the way you planned it?" He lunged at me then, just like he had at Richard's party, but this time I was ready for it. I sidestepped his charge and gave him a helpful push that sent him crashing into the vending machine behind me. Cans of soda exploded everywhere, and Dominic ended up on the floor covered in Diet Coke and looking like the fool he was. Plant security arrived within minutes, but by then half the cafeteria had recorded the incident and was already uploading it to social media. As they escorted me out of the building, I could hear Dominic's coworkers laughing and making jokes about Tarzan's big swing and miss. "Next time," I called back to him, "try cheating with someone who can fight back." The video of Dominic's vending machine crash went viral within hours, racking up thousands of views and hundreds of comments. Richard called me that evening, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Dude, you're like a one-man wrecking crew. First the truck, now this. Dominic's going to be a laughingstock for months." "Good," I said. "Maybe next time he'll think twice before going after married women." "Speaking of married women, have you heard from Alicia?" "Not a word. But I'm not done yet." "What else are you planning?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it through the phone. "Let's just say that if Dominic and Alicia want to be the center of attention, I'm going to make sure they get their wish." The next phase of my plan involved social media warfare. I'd never been particularly active on Facebook or Instagram, but I had accounts and a decent number of local friends and connections. More importantly, I had access to the neighborhood gossip groups that thrived on drama and scandal. I started subtly sharing the videos of Dominic's humiliation with carefully crafted comments about standing up for marriage and defending your family. I posted photos of the appointment card along with a detailed explanation of the web of lies and secret-keeping that had led to our confrontation. I shared screenshots of Dominic's threatening text messages, along with commentary about his true character. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers began sharing my posts, adding their own comments and experiences. Stories emerged about Dominic's previous inappropriate behavior with other women. People shared their own observations about Alicia's recent behavior and attitude changes. Within 48 hours, the narrative had shifted completely. Instead of being seen as the jealous husband who'd lost control at a party, I was now viewed as the wronged party, who'd finally stood up to a bully and a homewrecker. Dominic went from being the charming, attractive guy that women flirted with to being labeled a predator who pursued married women. Alicia went from being the beautiful, popular wife to being seen as an ungrateful cheater who'd betrayed a good man. The social media campaign was more effective than I'd dared hope, but it also brought an unexpected consequence. Friday afternoon, my mother called with news that made my stomach drop. "Alicia came to see me today," she said without preamble. "What did she want?" "To tell me that you've been harassing and stalking her and Dominic. She says you've been spreading lies about her online and that she's afraid of what you might do next." "And what did you tell her?" I told her that if she was afraid of her husband's reaction to her behavior, maybe she should have thought about that before she started behaving badly. Then I told her that if she was smart, she'd come home and try to fix her marriage before she lost everything. "What did she say to that?" "She said it was too late, that too much had happened and too many people were involved for things to go back to the way they were. She said she was filing for divorce." I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "Did she say where she's staying?" With her mother. But Greg, there's something else. She's not just filing for divorce. She's talking about claiming you've been abusive and threatening. She wants a restraining order. That's ridiculous. I never laid a hand on her. I know that, and you know that. But in a divorce, sometimes the truth gets twisted. You need to be careful. No more pranks, no more confrontations, no more social media posts. Let your lawyer handle things from here on out. But it was already too late for careful. Even as my mother was warning me to back down, the final act of my revenge plan was already in motion. The restraining order arrived on Saturday morning, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The legal document was full of accusations that would have been laughable if they weren't so serious. Harassment, stalking, threats of violence, destruction of property, and something called intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to Alicia's sworn statement, I had engaged in a pattern of increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior that made her fear for her safety and well-being. She claimed I had threatened both her and Dominic with physical violence, vandalized Dominic's vehicle, stalked him at his workplace, and used social media to destroy her reputation and livelihood. The restraining order prohibited me from contacting Alicia directly, coming within 500 feet of her or her mother's house, or posting about her on social media. Violation of any of these terms would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for not taking any nonsense from anyone. She read through the restraining order while I sat in her office, trying not to panic. "Well," she said finally, "your wife certainly has a flair for drama. Half of these allegations are exaggerated, and the other half are probably illegal for her to have made without evidence. Can she do this? Can she just make accusations and get a court order based on nothing? She can try, and she did try, but restraining orders based on false allegations rarely hold up under scrutiny, especially when there's evidence to contradict the claims." Jennifer pulled out a thick folder. "Fortunately, I've been doing some research since you called. The videos of your confrontations with Dominic actually work in your favor. They show him being the aggressor both times, while you were defending yourself. The social media posts you made are all factual and can be verified, and the text messages he sent you after the truck incident are clearly threatening and could actually be used to get a restraining order against him. So what happens now? Now we fight back. We're going to request a hearing to contest this restraining order, and we're going to present evidence that your wife and her boyfriend are the ones engaging in harassment and intimidation. We're also going to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, and we're going to make sure the court understands exactly who the victim is in this situation." I left Jennifer's office feeling slightly better, but also aware that the legal battle was just beginning. What I didn't expect was for the social battle to escalate so dramatically over the weekend. It started with a block party on Dominic and Susie's street. The neighborhood had planned it weeks in advance as a fall celebration, complete with a haunted house set up in the community center and trick-or-treating for the kids. What they hadn't planned for was the drama that had consumed their most notorious residents. I wasn't supposed to be there. The restraining order technically prohibited me from being in Dominic's neighborhood. But Richard had convinced me that as long as I stayed on public property and didn't approach Dominic or try to contact Alicia, I wasn't violating any court orders. Besides, he'd said, you have as much right to be at a public community event as anyone else. And I may have mentioned to a few people that Dominic's been bragging about getting you banned from the neighborhood. The few people turned out to be most of the block party planning committee, along with several neighbors who had strong opinions about married men who chased other people's wives. By the time I arrived at 6 p.m., there was already a crowd gathered around Dominic's house, and the atmosphere was more hostile than festive. Someone, I never found out who, had set up motion-activated speakers in the bushes around Dominic's property. Every time he or anyone else walked near his house, jungle sounds would blast from hidden speakers, monkey calls, elephant trumpets, and Tarzan yells. The effect was both hilarious and humiliating, especially since Dominic couldn't figure out where the sounds were coming from or how to make them stop. But the real masterpiece was the light show. Using a portable projector and a laptop, someone had programmed a display that projected words onto Dominic's garage door every few minutes. Cheater, homewrecker, liar, and coward appeared in large, glowing letters that could be seen from blocks away. The crowd loved it. Kids were running around trying to trigger the jungle sounds, while adults stood in groups laughing and taking photos. Dominic emerged from his house several times, looking increasingly frantic as he tried to locate and disable the equipment, but the speakers and projector were too well hidden and the crowd too large for him to do anything effective. "This is harassment," he finally shouted at the crowd. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," someone yelled back. "They'll probably want to see the show too." The police did come eventually, but by then the equipment had been mysteriously removed and the crowd had dispersed. The officers took Dominic's complaint seriously, but without any evidence of who was responsible or any ongoing disturbance, there wasn't much they could do except advise him to install security cameras if he was concerned about future incidents. What Dominic didn't know was that the entire evening had been live-streamed to the neighborhood Facebook group by multiple people, giving everyone a front-row seat to his humiliation. The videos racked up hundreds of views and comments, with most people expressing amusement at the jungle justice being served. But the social media attention had an unexpected consequence. By Monday morning, the story had spread beyond our local community and was being shared by divorce support groups, men's rights activists, and various other online communities that saw my situation as emblematic of larger social issues. Suddenly, I was receiving friend requests and messages from strangers across the country, all offering support and sharing their own stories of unfaithful spouses and messy divorces. The hashtag #ShropshireJungleJustice started trending locally, with people sharing the videos and memes about Tarzan's downfall. The attention was flattering, but it also made me a target. Alicia's lawyer filed a motion claiming that the block party incident proved I was violating the restraining order and engaging in coordinated harassment of her client. Even though I hadn't organized or participated in the pranks, my presence at the event was being used as evidence of my ongoing campaign of intimidation. Jennifer was not impressed with their legal strategy. "They're grasping at straws," she told me during our Tuesday meeting. "But we need to be smarter about this. No more public appearances at events where Dominic might be present, no more social media posts about either of them, and definitely no more pranks or stunts, even if you're not directly involved." What about the divorce proceedings? That's where we focus our energy. I've been gathering evidence of Alicia's affair, and it's more extensive than we initially thought. Apparently, she and Dominic have been seen together at restaurants, hotels, and other locations over the past several months. We have witnesses, credit card records, and even some photos that were posted on social media before they realized how incriminating they were. She showed me a folder full of evidence that painted a clear picture of an ongoing affair. There were photos of Alicia and Dominic at a restaurant across town, taken by someone who recognized them and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Date night for the beautiful people." There were hotel receipts charged to Alicia's credit card on days when she'd told me she was shopping with friends. There were text messages between Alicia and Susie discussing D and how to handle the Greg situation. "This is enough to prove adultery in court," Jennifer said, which means she won't be entitled to alimony and her chances of getting a favorable property settlement are minimal. Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery still matters when it comes to financial settlements. What about her claims that I've been abusive? We have evidence to refute those too. The videos show you defending yourself, not attacking anyone. The social media posts are factual, not defamatory. And we have witnesses who will testify that you never threatened or harmed Alicia in any way. I left Jennifer's office feeling optimistic about the legal proceedings, but I was unprepared for what happened next. Wednesday afternoon, I received a call from my boss informing me that Alicia had contacted the restaurant corporate office with complaints about my unstable behavior and claims that I was using company resources to stalk and harass her and her friends. "I don't believe a word of it," my boss said, "but corporate is nervous about the negative publicity. They want you to take a leave of absence until this whole mess gets sorted out." "Are you firing me?" "Not firing. Administrative leave with pay. But Greg, you need to understand that if this gets any more public or if there are any more incidents, they might not have a choice." The realization that Alicia was now targeting my livelihood made something snap inside me. I'd been trying to play by the rules, to handle things through proper legal channels, but she was escalating the conflict in ways that could destroy my career and financial stability. That night, I sat in my empty house and made a decision. If Alicia wanted to play hardball, if she wanted to use every weapon at her disposal to destroy me, then I was going to stop holding back. The gloves were coming off, and she was about to learn that I had weapons of my own. The final confrontation was coming, and this time I was going to make sure I won. The storm hit on Friday night, bringing with it the kind of wind and rain that made Michigan Octobers memorable. I was in my kitchen, nursing a beer and reviewing the divorce papers Jennifer had prepared, when I heard the first sound of breaking glass. It came from the back of the house, followed immediately by the crash of something heavy hitting the floor. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the sound, my heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and anticipation. I'd been expecting this confrontation for days, ever since Alicia's increasingly desperate attempts to destroy my reputation and career had made it clear that she wasn't going to settle for a quiet divorce. I found Dominic in my dining room, standing among the remains of the sliding glass door he'd just smashed with a patio chair. He was soaked from the rain and breathing heavily, his hair plastered to his head and his clothes clinging to his muscular frame. In the dim light, he looked more like a desperate animal than the confident predator he'd always pretended to be. "You ruined my life," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm outside. "You destroyed everything I had, everything I worked for. Now I'm going to return the favor." "Dominic," I said calmly, setting down my beer and picking up my phone. "You're breaking into my house. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. Call them. By the time they get here, you'll be in no condition to press charges." He started toward me, and I realized he was serious about violence. This wasn't going to be another pushing match or public confrontation. He was here to hurt me, possibly seriously, and the storm outside would mask any sounds of struggle. But I'd been preparing for this possibility ever since the restraining order had been filed. My years managing restaurants had taught me a lot about dealing with aggressive customers, drunk employees, and emergency situations. More importantly, my house was my territory, and I knew every inch of it in ways that Dominic didn't. I backed into the kitchen, keeping the central island between us while I dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring, and I quickly explained that someone had broken into my house and was threatening me. "Officers are on the way," she said. "Stay on the line and try to get to a safe location." "Kind of hard to do when he's between me and the exits," I said, watching Dominic circle the island like a predator stalking prey. "You think you're so clever," he said, his voice full of rage, "hiding behind lawyers and restraining orders and social media posts. But you're just a coward who can't handle losing his wife to a better man." "Better man?" I laughed, genuinely amused despite the circumstances. "You mean the guy who's about to go to prison for breaking and entering? The guy whose wife left him and took the kids? The guy who got fired from his job for fighting in the cafeteria? That better man." His face went red with fury. I didn't get fired." "Really? Because I heard from 3 different people that you were terminated yesterday for creating a hostile work environment. Apparently, your coworkers got tired of your drama affecting their workplace." It was a calculated insult, designed to make him angry enough to do something stupid. It worked. He lunged across the kitchen island, trying to grab me, but I was ready for him. I'd spent the week preparing my house for exactly this scenario, turning my kitchen into a defensive maze that would give me every advantage. As Dominic vaulted over the island, I pulled the release cord on the flour bomb I'd rigged above the stove. 20 pounds of flour exploded across the kitchen, creating a white cloud that temporarily blinded him and made the floor slippery as wet shoes mixed with powder. While he was coughing and trying to clear his vision, I triggered the second trap, a pantry door that swung out on a rope pulley system, catching him in the chest and sending him stumbling backward into the refrigerator. The impact knocked over a carefully balanced collection of pots and pans, creating a tremendous crash that would be clearly audible to the 911 operator. "What's happening?" the operator asked urgently. "The intruder just ran into my kitchen defenses," I said, pulling out my phone to record everything. "He's covered in flour and looks like he's been wrestling with a bakery." Dominic was struggling to get back on his feet, slipping on the flour-covered floor and cursing creatively. I helped him along by squirting dish soap across the linoleum, making it even more treacherous for someone wearing wet shoes. He gasped, finally managing to stand up. "I'm going to kill you." "You're going to try," I said, backing toward the living room while keeping my phone camera trained on him. "But first, you might want to explain to the police why you broke into my house on a night when you're supposed to be staying away from me due to a restraining order." "What restraining order?" I smiled. "The one I filed against you yesterday, based on your threatening text messages and history of violent behavior. Funny thing about restraining orders, they work both ways." The look of confusion and dawning realization on his face was priceless. He'd been so focused on Alicia's legal maneuvering that he hadn't considered I might have legal weapons of my own. "That's impossible. You can't—" "I can, and I did. Jennifer Walsh is a very good lawyer, and she doesn't like men who threaten her clients." The sound of sirens was getting closer, and Dominic's expression shifted from rage to panic. He looked around the destroyed kitchen, taking in the flour covering every surface, the broken glass from the patio door, and the phone in my hand that was recording everything. "This is self-defense," he said desperately. "You attacked me first." "Really?" "Because the 911 recording is going to show that you broke into my house and threatened to kill me. The video I'm taking is going to show you covered in flour because you triggered the defensive measures I set up to protect myself from exactly this kind of home invasion." The front door burst open, and 3 police officers entered with weapons drawn. They took in the scene quickly, Dominic covered in flour and clearly the aggressor, me standing calmly with my phone and obviously the homeowner, and a kitchen that looked like a war zone. "He broke in through the back door," I told the officers, pointing to the shattered glass. "I've got it all on 911 recording, and I've been filming since he got here." While 2 officers handcuffed Dominic and read him his rights, the third took my statement and examined the evidence. The broken door, the flower explosion, and the video recording all supported my claim of self-defense against a home invader. But the real surprise came when 2 more cars pulled up outside. Alicia climbed out of the first one, followed by her mother, Patricia. Susie emerged from the second car, looking tired and defeated. "What are they doing here?" I asked the officer. Apparently the suspect called them before he broke in. They were supposed to be his backup plan, but they arrived just in time to witness his arrest. Alicia ran toward the house, but the officer stopped her at the door. Through the rain and wind, I could hear her screaming at them about harassment and restraining orders, and how I was the real criminal in the situation. "Ma'am," one of the officers said patiently, "your friend just broke into this man's house and threatened to kill him. Whatever civil disputes you have can be settled in court, but right now he's under arrest for breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and assault." Patricia was yelling something about police brutality and false accusations, while Susie stood in the rain looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Officers," I said, "there's something else you should know. I have evidence that these 3 people have been coordinating a campaign of harassment against me, including false allegations and attempts to destroy my employment." I showed them the folder of evidence Jennifer had compiled: the threatening text messages, the false restraining order allegations, the complaints to my employer, and the documented affair that had started this whole mess. "This is quite a collection," the lead officer said, flipping through the papers. "You might want to consider filing additional charges." "I intend to." As they loaded Dominic into the police car, I stepped out onto my front porch to address the 3 women who had made my life hell for the past several months. "Ladies," I said, my voice carrying clearly despite the storm, "I have something to tell you." The neighborhood had come alive despite the late hour and bad weather. Lights were on in houses up and down the street, and I could see people watching from their windows and doorways. Someone was recording with their phone, which meant this final confrontation would be preserved for posterity. "Alicia," I continued, "you wanted excitement and danger, and a man who would make you feel alive. Congratulations. You found him. Unfortunately, the man you chose is now on his way to jail for breaking into your husband's house and threatening murder." She started to respond, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You see, while you 3 have been plotting and scheming and trying to destroy my life, I've been working with my lawyer to uncover the truth about all of you. And the truth is even more interesting than I expected." I pulled out the final piece of evidence Jennifer had discovered just that afternoon, a DNA test result that had been filed with the family court in connection with a paternity case. It turns out that the baby Dominic's ex-girlfriend is carrying isn't his after all. It belongs to Jake Morrison, my ex-fiance's husband, the same Jake Morrison who got Mara pregnant while she was engaged to me 3 years ago. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain and wind. Alicia's face had gone pale, while Patricia looked confused and Susie appeared to be in shock. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued. "The reason Dominic's ex-girlfriend asked Alicia to go to the doctor with her wasn't because she needed moral support. It was because she needed someone to help her figure out how to blackmail Jake Morrison for child support without destroying his marriage to Mara." I looked directly at Alicia. "You weren't helping a scared pregnant woman. You were helping orchestrate an extortion scheme, and you were using that scheme as an excuse to spend time with Dominic while planning your own affair." "That's not true," Alicia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's all true. Jennifer found the text messages between you and Dominic's ex-girlfriend. She found the emails discussing payment schedules and custody arrangements. She even found the bank records showing that Jake Morrison has been making monthly payments to an account that you helped set up. The crowd of neighbors had grown larger, and I could see phones recording from multiple angles. This confrontation was going to be shared across social media within minutes, ensuring that everyone in town would know the full story. "So, let me make sure I understand the situation correctly," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the storm. "Dominic breaks into my house because his life has been ruined by his affair with my wife. Alicia files false restraining orders because she's afraid her extortion scheme will be exposed. And all of this started because my ex-fiance's husband couldn't keep it in his pants, just like he couldn't 3 years ago when he got Mara pregnant while she was engaged to me." I turned to Susie, who was standing in the rain looking utterly defeated. "And you, Susie, you knew about all of it. You knew about the affair, the extortion, the lies, and the schemes. You helped coordinate it because you thought you could control the situation and keep your own marriage together. How did that work out for you?" Susie burst into tears. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted everyone to be happy." "Well, congratulations. Your husband is going to prison, Your best friend is about to be charged with extortion and filing false police reports, and you're an accessory to multiple felonies. I hope everyone's happiness was worth it." The police officers had been listening to this exchange with growing interest, and I could see them taking notes and exchanging glances. "Sir," the lead officer said, "we're going to need you to come to the station tomorrow to file formal charges and provide all this evidence to the district attorney." "I'll be there first thing in the morning." As the police cars pulled away with Dominic in custody, I stood on my porch watching the 3 women who had tried to destroy me. They were huddled together in the rain, looking like the defeated conspirators they were. "Ladies," I called out one final time, "you wanted drama and excitement and the thrill of forbidden romance. You wanted to feel like the stars of your own soap opera. Well, congratulations, you got your wish. Unfortunately for you, this is the episode where the good guy wins and the villains get what they deserve." I turned and walked back into my house, stepping carefully around the flour and broken glass. Through the shattered patio door, I could hear them arguing among themselves, their voices rising above the storm as they realized the full scope of their legal troubles. My phone was already buzzing with notifications as the videos of the confrontations spread across social media. The hashtag #ChartJungleJustice was trending again, but this time the story had a definitive ending. I poured myself a fresh beer and called Jennifer to update her on the night's events. She listened to my account with obvious satisfaction, occasionally asking questions about specific details and evidence. "This is better than I hoped," she said when I finished. "With Dominic's arrest and the evidence of the extortion scheme, Alicia's credibility is completely destroyed. The restraining order will be dismissed, the divorce will be settled entirely in your favor, and there's a good chance she'll be facing criminal charges of her own." "What about my job?" "After tonight, I suspect your employer will be calling to apologize and ask you to come back immediately. No company wants to be seen as punishing the victim of a home invasion and extortion scheme." I hung up the phone and looked around my destroyed kitchen. It would take days to clean up the flour and replace the broken door, but it was worth it. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the confused, betrayed husband who'd been stumbling through a maze of lies and manipulation, but the confident, capable man who could handle whatever challenges life threw at him. Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, and I could see my neighbors returning to their houses. Several of them waved at me through their windows, and I knew that by tomorrow morning the entire town would know the full story of what had happened. I walked to my front door and looked out at the quiet street. Alicia's car was gone, along with Patricia's Cadillac. Only Susie remained, sitting in her car in the rain, probably trying to figure out where to go now that her world had collapsed. I felt a moment of sympathy for her. She'd been caught up in something larger than herself and had made bad decisions in an attempt to help people she cared about. But then I remembered all the lies, all the manipulation, all the attempts to destroy my life and reputation, and the sympathy faded. Thunder rolled across the sky one last time, and I smiled as I closed the door and locked it securely. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and police statements and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. But tonight, I was content to stand in my flour-covered kitchen, drinking a beer and enjoying the sweet taste of victory. "Next Halloween," I said to my empty house, "I'm definitely just staying home and handing out candy.